Hey, good Monday morning, everybody. BAM weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. We have an important update today as we end June and head into the month of July, and what looks to be an increasing risk for a pretty decent heat wave as we work into the middle part of the month. We've seen pretty consistent warmer trends even in the short term in the data, and so we want to kind of talk about a couple of fronts that we're keeping an eye on. Are they really going to make that big of an impact? And then when will a bigger heat threat begin to set up across specifically the Ag Belt region? Let's start here. This was from our AM Ag Weather report this morning, just kind of an overview of the next 2 weeks. And you can see next 7 days generally averaging out warmer than normal again across the majority of the Ag Belt. Now, not substantial heat, I would say, not extreme heat, if you will, but consistently warmer than normal. Consistently, 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees warmer than normal, especially with those daytime highs across the Ag Belt region. And in terms of moisture, you look at the next 7 days, guys, the yellow color being an inch plus, it's messy in nature. Those 1 inch plus totals are very sporadic. They're very messy. I do think later in the period we start to get a little bit more active again across the Central Plains, but you can see, guys, generally speaking, it's not widespread soaked the next 7 days. Will there be timely rains? Yes, but is it extremely active? I wouldn't say so. It's not bone dry. It's not extremely active. We're somewhere in the middle with just these messy rainfall opportunities. In terms of the week 2 time frame, this red dashed area, I would watch for a warmer trend, specifically late in the week 2 period. There is a front in there that will moderate things. I'll show you that in a little bit more detail here in a moment. My concern is that data has been too cool in the extended range and that we will start to see a warm up late in this time frame. That data may be lingering on to some of the moderation a little bit too long. And subsequently, in terms of moisture, concerned that this red dashed area could end up verifying messier in nature, a little bit more sporadic, maybe slightly wetter in this green dashed area. And again, guys, because of the bias to be a little bit underdone with some of the warmth, data has been a little bit too widespread with some of the heavier moisture in the extended range. I think that could be the case once again in the week 2 time frame, though it should be more active again in parts of Kansas, Nebraska, and probably western Iowa. Going day by day here, just to give you an idea of how this pattern is going to evolve, we talked about the tendency for some of the ups and downs, especially early in the month, perhaps later in the month as well. We'll touch on that here in a bit. But the core of the warmth at times will set up across the Mountain West, and then it will bleed further to the east, which we see as we work into your 4th of July holiday weekend. Starts to set back up over the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, pushes east, we get a little front to come in, and then we build in the warmth once again across the west. Here's that moderation front around the 10th to the 11th of the month. Could be a couple of cooler days in here, but this is where I start to think day 13, day 14, data lingering onto this cooler air a little bit too long. I suspect that the warmth that will rebuild initially across the Canadian prairies and the Pacific Northwest and into the Mountain West will want to bleed into the Ag Belt a little bit faster late in the week 2 time frame than what data is currently picking up on. So right now, week 2 data may be a little bit underdone with some of the warmth, and I think eventually what this sets up is perhaps a bigger heat wave beyond the week 2 time frame as we work towards the midway point of the month. Here's another reason I suspect data could be a little bit too cool late week 2. Looking at East Asia, which has done a very good job, I would say, over the past several weeks picking out this pattern, it's quite warm. In fact, the late week 2 time frame into the early week 3 time frame is a good bit warmer than normal in terms of the signal here across the Ag Belt. And so, again, just concerned that the week 2 data in the extended range may be a little bit underdone with the warmth. Is it extreme, at least by the end of the period? Probably not. But again, just think they're lingering that cooler air a touch too long. Even with that in mind, even with the risk that late in the period it could turn a little bit warmer, here's the next 2 weeks, or the first 2 weeks of July. You can see warmer than normal across the majority of the northern tier of the U.S. You kind of have your 2 areas that we've talked about at length out in the Canadian prairies, the Pacific Northwest, the Mountain West, and then your secondary area in here. At times the warmth sets up in here, at times it sets up in here. In general, you average out warmer than normal across the entirety of the northern tier of the United States. And to an extent, it's similar to the last 2 weeks. Maybe not as notable, but in terms of the temperatures averaging out widespread warmer than normal, that will continue. I think the only difference is we had the tendency mid to late June for the core of the warmth to set up more east. Naturally, heading into July, due to our global wind correlation, that should tick a little bit further to the north and to the west. In terms of precipitation, the next 2 weeks, guys, again, you can kind of see the messy nature of things. If there's an area that's seasonable to have some spots that get skipped out, it's probably in the eastern ag belt. But even in this area that I circled, there's going to be timely rains. We're seeing it today. There's scattered rain and storm threats in this area today. Last night in Bloomington, we saw a flash flood event. And so it's just the nature of things that ends up messier, where somebody could pick up a quick inch or two of rain in an hour and somebody down the road gets skipped out for multiple days in a row. We've seen that across the eastern ag belt, the Ohio Valley, over the past 7 days. I think it's more of the same ahead, with perhaps more widespread rainfall threats beginning to set up across parts of the western and the central plains over the next 2 weeks. But even there, you're talking about 100 to 125% of normal. It's not excessive rains. I would say not really extreme on one end of the spectrum or the other. In terms of the last 14 days, again, you can see some of the similarities compared to the next 14 days in terms of where the moisture sets up. It's been across the upper Midwest, parts of the plains. The lower Ohio Valley has been a little bit less widespread with the moisture. Now, in terms of the rest of July, guys, we talked at length about this on Friday. I want to expand on it a little bit here. Right now, the latest value actually at -2. So we're even lower than what data indicating right now. And you can see the major bias to be too high with our global winds as of late, which is why I'm, again, probably a little skeptical of this signal here. Regardless, this impact of the extremely negative AAM should linger well through the middle part of July. Looking at years that were as negative as this year, late June, there are only 4 since 2000, 2022, 2018, 2012, and 2010. And the theme in the mid-latitudes, really across the northern hemisphere, but especially in the United States, is mild. Big mild signal here. Really, this would be a warm signal for the vast majority of the United States, especially across the northern tier of the United States and perhaps in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. You take a look at these years in terms of how they average out for July as a whole, you can see just the majority of the country warmer than normal, maybe a slight tendency for more notable warmth to be here across parts of the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. In terms of moisture, I would not say bone dry, You can kind of see that messy ring of fire type of pattern around here. But if there's a spot that into the middle part of July could start to get a little bit drier, Southwest Ohio Valley, parts of the Central Plains, through this region in here. But even here, there were some spots that cashed in, and that's why I continue to emphasize that word messy. It's probably the word of the day. If there's an area that's a little bit drier, it's in here. But even then, probably not bone dry. Taking a look at some data, we've got data support for it as well. This is the latest GEFS. This is specifically the 18th to the 23rd or so. Wouldn't be shocked if it shows up even a little bit earlier than that, but you can certainly see, if we go back here, very, very similar type of a pattern signal to what data is already indicating for the middle part of July. And the CFS, while I think it could be a little bit too far south and west with this heat, it's trying to pick up on it as well. It's even trying to see some of the ring of fire pattern. Again, maybe a little bit too widespread with the dryness, but you can see the ring of fire pattern that it's trying to show up with some drier risk down across the Central Plains. With all that in mind, this is the area that I want to target. I'm going to say anytime between the 15th and the 22nd, this beginning to ramp up. Give or take a couple of days. If anything, it may be slightly later than the 15th, but somewhere around there, middle part of July. I see the risk for a substantial heat wave. Now, will it be record-breaking? I'm not 100% convinced on that yet because it has been active. Typically, this time of the year, you need some dryness in place to really ramp up those high temperatures. Wouldn't be shocked for it to be very muggy and to see record warm overnight lows. That would not shock me. Regardless, this red area, I do think that there's the risk for a substantial heat wave in here. Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, as we head into the midway point of the month. And we factor that into our final July outlook here. Again, there's some push and pull, there's some moderation at times. Beginning of the month, wouldn't be shocked to see a little bit of that at the end of the month as well. But given that mid-July heat risk, going much above normal for the majority of the ag belt. And again, the only reason that this isn't maybe more extreme, we didn't add a third color in here, is because of the lack of more widespread dryness, and because there is some push and pull of where the core of the warmth will be, especially the first half of the month. So regardless, I think July is a hot month. I think it's probably one of the hottest Julys for the U.S. as a whole on record. Our cooling demand signals at 400. There's only been a couple of years on record that have been 400 or above. So it's an aggressive forecast. It's a very hot forecast overall for the month of July. And in terms of precipitation, guys, again, I think that we continue to deal with these messy rainfall opportunities in the ag belt across the main corn belt region. But we need to watch. We need to keep an eye on the southeast plains, parts of the Ohio Valley, parts of the Tennessee Valley, for more spots that can miss out. The combination of some heat and some dryness, or some spots that get skipped over, there could be some dryness that starts to build in this area. And even in the normal to above normal areas, there's probably some spots that get skipped over as well. I think the bottom line here is, guys, it's going to be hot. And with that, and with the fact that it's a messier, more sporadic type of a rain pattern, there's probably going to be localized spots that dry out. Some of you are going to be in a spot that gets skipped over by all these rain opportunities and you get dry. But many of you will see timely rains that prevent it from getting too bad as we go through the middle part of July. Guys, that's all that I have for today's forecast. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out on the Clarity platform, and I hope you all have a great rest of your last day of June.